Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for week 2 of Deeper Dive with Buffalo Bayou Partnership. I'm Jessica McFall, Communication and Membership Coordinator for Buffalo Bayou Partnership. Last week, if you didn't join us, we had an overview of Buffalo Bayou Partnership with BBP President Anne Olson. We talked about the past projects of our nonprofit and current initiatives. And this time around, we're going to be looking towards the future and diving deeper into the Buffalo Bayou East Master Plan. Leading the discussion will be BBP Project Manager Jose Solis. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat box below, and we will get to as many as we can afterwards. So I'm going to hand it over to Jose.
Hi, as Jessica mentioned, I'm Jose Solis. I'm the project manager for Buffalo Bayou Partnership. Today, we're going to be looking at the Buffalo Bayou East Master Plan, and let me quickly switch over to that. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the Buffalo Bayou East Master Plan. Buffalo Bayou East is the section of Buffalo Bayou east of downtown. It runs essentially from US 59 to the turning basin, the Port of Houston turning basin. It's about 4.5 miles of bayou in this area. Many of you are residents of this area or very familiar with this area. For those of you that are not, the big landmark that we always give people is NEFA's. NEFA's is obviously a place many people have been to. It's essentially the sort of eastern edge of this part of the bayou. Buffalo Bayou East is actually very different than what many other people are used to on areas west of downtown. The bayou is actually much wider. The banks are actually a lot steeper, and it's really a very lush and natural setting. It actually feels much more like a real river than what most people think of as a bayou. This part of town is also really where Houston started. Many of the sites in this part of Houston are some of the earliest settlements across the region. So really Houston was, started here. On top of that, those settlements became communities like the Fifth Ward, the Greater East End, that really became some of the most culturally rich neighborhoods in the city. And much of the history of African-American Houstonians and Mexican-American Houstonians can really be traced back to this part of town. As part of the master planning process, we had a really extensive public engagement strategy. During the process, we had 5 big community meetings where what we did was we asked the community, what do you want to see in this master plan? What are the features? What are the destinations? What do you want incorporated? And then through the process of the 5 meetings, we took those ideas, slowly incorporated them, and then prioritized what would finally be included in the final plan. These are statistics that really show what we did as part of that community engagement. In those 5 meetings, we had over 700 participants providing that feedback. We also met with a bunch of smaller organizations so that we had more closely knit conversations about what people wanted to see included. To reach out to neighborhoods, we sent out over 50,000 postcards to get people involved. And we had an extensive social media campaign as well, where we, as you can see, we reached over 130,000 people, but we really targeted people in the neighborhoods surrounding the bayou and the zip codes that lived along. We own these three sites right here, and as part of the plan, we're looking to transform these industrial pieces or structures and sites into new uses that really draw on the community. For Connected, we really want to both draw people physically and socially together along the bayou. The neighborhoods in this area are actually very disconnected from the bayou. A lot of those former industrial sites and still active industrial sites acted as a barrier to the bayou. And so we really want to create spaces that connect people from the neighborhoods to the waterway itself. As part of that, we want to create a large network of on and off street trails that allow people to move along the bayou itself, but also allow people to connect north and south so that people in communities really have access to the waterway and in fact actually to each other. Oops, sorry. Unlike Buffalo Bayou Park, which was a large single green space on the bayou, this area we have actually is more broken up into smaller areas that we have access to, either properties that Buffalo Bayou Partnership owns or that the city of Houston or Harris County owns. And as part of that, we're going to create a network of different spaces that have different activities and different facilities that in conjunction and together actually create all of the pieces of what you would see in a larger regional park. As far as inclusive goes, since these are some of the neighborhoods that are the most, that have very long-standing histories, people have been living here for generations, we want to make sure that the people there that have lived there for all these years really feel as though they belong here. But we're also seeing new people that are moving into this area, and so we want to make sure that those people feel welcome too. Excuse me. One initiative we're including in the master plan is to develop what we're calling economically inclusive housing. Unfortunately, this part of town has seen gentrification. And so one of the things we're trying to do is provide additional housing in the area that helps address displacement issues in an affordable way, but that also reflects the character of the neighborhood so people really can stay in a neighborhood that they feel welcome. We're also looking at providing additional opportunities for small businesses. Because we have a bunch of parks, there are opportunities for things like food trucks, food offerings, different vendors to provide things that the community needs. And also, since we'll be maintaining these parks, we look at the operations and maintenance of all these facilities as an opportunity to engage local businesses and give them an opportunity for economic development. Health and wellness is also a very key component of the master plan. There are unfortunately things like hypertension or high blood pressure, diabetes that are rampant in neighborhoods around here. We're also seeing a limited access to things like open space, to healthy food. So we really want to incorporate things that give people in neighborhoods around this area access to health and wellness. And finally, with resilience, obviously with Harvey, it's a big, flooding is a thing that many Houstonians are worried about. In this section of the bayou, we didn't worry about flooding so much. Unfortunately, we also had a lot of erosion in many areas of the bayou, in Buffalo Bayou East. In some instances, we had bayou banks shift up to 100 feet. So a lot of what we're looking at with what we're doing along the bayou is how do we stabilize the banks so that we can protect all of the investments we'll be making in this area. Also, in terms of resilience, we'll be looking at incorporating what are called low impact design elements. These are things like what you see on the screen, bioswales, rain gardens, that work to help prevent localized flooding, so you don't have street flooding, things like that. So in addition to protecting the bayou, we're also protecting surrounding neighborhoods. Now we're going to look at what we call the area-wide plan. This actually shows all of the different pieces that will be included in the plan from east to west. From a sort of high-level standpoint, these are the statistics of what the plan covers. It's over 260 acres of new and improved parks, over 44 miles of on and off street trails, bridges, waterfront access point, even including things like expanding tree canopy. Because this area is so large and it's such a long length of the bayou, we really think of it as 4 separate and distinct areas that I'll walk through individually. The downtown gateway is really the front door from downtown to the water. This piece of the bayou is really basically built upon what will be happening with the North Highway Improvement Project, which is the project that reroutes I-45 around downtown. That project includes a deck park on the east side of downtown that will serve the convention and entertainment district. So our plan essentially works to connect from the end of that deck park all the way through an elevated walkway to the bayou itself. In addition, TxDOT, as they build this section of the bayou, is going to need 30 acres of detention for water runoff. And so we're incorporating that into the actual master plan as well. So this slide gives you a sense of what the downtown gateway would look like. Because it's a low-lying area and large parts of it fall within the 500-year floodplain, it will largely be a green and open space. So you'll have areas like picnic lawns, sports fields, things like that, additional trails to connect east and west, north to south. As I mentioned, with the TxDOT detention facility, we're looking to transform that. Instead of it just being essentially a big hole that collects water, we're going to transform that into more of a natural wetland and pond area. So instead of it just sort of sitting there, we actually get a natural feature that becomes a benefit for everybody in the community. This is actually a piece that we've been working on with TxDOT already. The Clayton Homes Trail essentially will connect the downtown segments of Buffalo Bayou trails to many of the trails that exist on the east. This is actually an old rail trestle bridge that exists underneath I-59. And these trails will actually be opening up in the very near future. The next area is what we're calling the central hub. This is, we really see as the open green space heart of Buffalo Bayou East. This will be where residents from across the entire area can congregate and attend, take place in a bunch of activities outdoors and on both sides of the bayou, and also is the area where we're looking to extend the neighborhood fabric towards the bayou. The main piece of this is Tony Marron Park. Tony Marron Park is an existing 20-acre park on North York at the bayou that it has existing soccer fields, it has a playground, some open lawns, and a few natural areas. It's fairly basic in terms of the amenity it provides, so we're really looking to enhance what's there and really give new opportunities for the neighborhood. So this rendering shows a lot of the sort of more active features of the park, so areas for kids to play, sports fields, picnic pavilions that can host events and other activities. We're also looking to incorporate a lot of green spaces into the park. There's already a natural creek bed within the park that we're looking to really restore and enhance and provide other open lawns and green areas so that it's really becomes a natural abode in the city for people looking to get away from, kind of the hustle and bustle of day-to-day life in the city. We also already have a boat launch facility on one of the pieces of property over here. So we're looking to build on that boat access and really make this a boating center. So this is where people could bring their kayak, canoe, get in the water, and really enjoy the water itself, which is, in this stretch of the bayou, is very limited at this point. This gives an overall sense of what the extent of the park is. Right now, we have essentially a 20-acre park that exists right in this area. The park will then expand to this 44-acre area, and we would, for example, this is where the existing sports fields are. We would keep those where they are and enhance them. Look at it upgrading things like the creek bed, but also providing additional amenities in the park. On the north side of the bayou and connected to Tony Marron Park is Japhet Creek. Japhet Creek is an existing natural tributary to the bayou. It's in fact one of the few natural tributaries that's still not concreted over that connects to the bayou. Originally, this creek connected all the way up to the 5th Ward. At this point, the creek is only really visible from Clayton Drive all the way to the bayou. And so we see this as the real connection from the 5th Wards and neighborhoods north of the bayou to provide access to the waterway itself. And so at Clinton Drive itself, we look to create additional park space, and then along the creek bed itself, really make that a natural connection from the neighborhoods north to the water. This rendering gives you a sense of what that restored creek bed would look like. We'd have things like nature trails that would connect to the creek itself, an actual, more of a trail that would connect from the neighborhood down to the bayou, and then we'd also provide places for kids and other activities and things like tree houses. But overall, this creek, we really want, it's already very natural and beautiful, and we really want to just enhance what's there and really restore it to what, to what it really needs to be. On the south side of the bayou, we have an area we're calling Lockwood South, and this is an affordable, an extension of the neighborhood that provides affordable housing with workforce housing. So as I mentioned, parts of these neighborhoods are seeing a lot of gentrification. And so what we're looking at here is providing housing that people in the neighborhood that have lived here for generations can move into at a price point that they can afford, and we actually see this housing existing in perpetuity. So this really provides a long-term solution to gentrification issues. The next area of the bayou is what we're calling the industrial district. This area has several of the sites that Buffalo Bayou Partnership owns that are former industrial sites that we're looking to convert into new uses. So on the north side, we own this property here, which is the what we're calling the Lockwood Drive wastewater treatment plant. On the area east of Lockwood Drive, the settling tanks and settling basins are still there. If you drive over the bridge at Lockwood Drive, you can actually still see them to this day. And so what we're looking at doing is converting those existing structures into essentially floating water gardens that create a really natural and unique space that you really are not going to find anywhere else in the city and probably across the region. So it provides an amenity for people in this neighborhood, but it also works to draw people from across this part of Texas, really. On the west side of Lockwood Drive, we're creating what we call the Lockwood Adventure Park. In the Buffalo Bayou East neighborhoods, there's very limited access to exercise, which contributes to a lot of those health issues we talked about earlier. So what we see this is an area where people can go out and really work out in a natural setting and provide a lot of different options for how they would want to exercise. So for example, we'll have things like training hills that people can run up and down, ropes courses that allow people to sort of test their agility, rock climbing walls, running trails, things like that, but all in a natural setting. So it really creates is an enjoyable environment for everybody in the community. On the south side of the bayou, we own a property called Turkey Bend. If any of you were at the launch of the master plan, this is the wharf where we had it. The property consists of two sort of properties, really. One is a 4-acre wharf area that includes a dock, existing wooden dock. There's also a 20,000 square foot warehouse structure with an incorporated crane in it, and then this large gantry that extends out over the water. Because what we really see with this part of the site is to really create it like a boardwalk. So we'd have areas for things like food trucks, areas for people to eat and drink, be able to host big events like the launch we had. But since this is also an area of the bayou that's not on the main channel, we also see this as another one of those locations where we can have a big boating operation. So people can actually learn how to kayak and canoe and not have to really worry about the current of the bayou carrying them away. We also have this 20,000 square foot warehouse structure on the bayou. We really see this as a place for big outdoor events, things like you see here, this concert, festivals, markets, things like that we can hold directly on the water in an environment that you really don't have access to this anywhere in the city. The second piece of Turkey Bend is this 52,000 square foot warehouse that's actually on Navigation Drive. This is actually one of the few spots on Navigation that actually has direct access to the water. Inside the building, for those of you that didn't go to the launch, there's a large tunnel that actually connects inside the building, goes underneath this railroad track, and actually connects to the waterfront itself. And so we see transforming this building into a large community center for events like art gallery openings, public meetings, public indoor events, things like that. So it really becomes a place the community can congregate. The last space that we look at is what we're calling the Eastern Terminus. This is the eastern green space anchor of the plan before you get into the port. So it's sort of the end cap of the overall project. And we already, in this area, we have a project that Buffalo Bayou Partnership has already developed. The Yolanda Black Navarro Buffalo Bend Nature Park is a site that had been an abandoned industrial site, and we converted it into a nature park that has things like ponds and nature trails, scenic overlooks, places to look at the water, things like that. So it's already an amenity for the nature for people in these neighborhoods that don't have access to the water. And so what we see doing is connecting that piece to two other properties along the bayou. Hidalgo Park is another existing park in the neighborhood. It's one of the most historic parks in the city and has been used for generations. On the north side of the bayou, the Port of Houston actually owns a property that they've never really developed we're calling it the Harbor Street site. So what we're looking at doing with this is, one, connecting all of these pieces together so that there would be a trail connection between Yolanda Black Navarro Buffalo Bend Nature Park to Hidalgo Park, and then a pedestrian bridge to the port site. We would then develop the port site into an additional park space. So effectively, all three of these spaces at the Eastern Terminus would really function like one big open green space for everybody in the community. This rendering gives an idea of what the connection between Hidalgo Park and the nature park will look like. We'd provide additional access down to the water, provide things like a boat launch at that point, and then provide a pedestrian bridge that would connect from Hidalgo Park to that nature center to really connect the two. As I mentioned earlier, we also connections are a really big part of the Buffalo Bayou East master plan. The plan identifies over 44 miles of on and off street trails throughout the area. Many of them will, connect east to west, but we also see many of them connecting north to south, like we mentioned. So for example, on the left-hand side, you'll see this is what a bayou trail would look like. We provide things like lighting so you feel secure at night. It'd be wide so that, you can have people, both bike riding and walking and running, jogging. We'd also have things like, benches, benches for people to rest along the way, and things like wayfinding signage so people know how to get around. And then in the neighborhoods themselves, we would have on-street bike paths that would then transition to off-street bike paths, so you could make a seamless transition from a neighborhood on either side of the bayou to the waterway on a safe path. Another feature of the Buffalo Bayou East Master Plan is we're really thinking of how to transform Navigation Boulevard. If you've driven on it, it's actually way oversized for the amount of traffic that it has today. And so what we're looking at doing is transforming many of the lanes of traffic that are really now unused and making a linear greenway. So we're taking space from cars and actually giving it to people so that people really can use this space as a connection across the entire Buffalo Bayou East area throughout on the south side of the bayou. And lastly, and this was one of the biggest things we learned in the community engagement activities we did during the master planning process, the number one thing more than anything else that people really wanted access to was the water itself. Like, literally, this was the number one thing that people asked for. So a big part of the master plan is to look at all the different destinations that we're creating and create opportunities for people to really get in the water and to travel up and down the bayou. So that gives an overview of what we're looking at doing. I've shown a lot of different pieces here, and each piece represents its own unique project. So this is, as we mentioned earlier, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. This is something that'll happen over the next 20+ years. So in terms of implementation, we're looking at breaking the plan into individual projects that will, one by one, or in some cases more than one at a time, actually implementing to create the entire master plan. And with that, I'm going to let it pass it back to Jessica to talk about next steps.
Yeah, so there are some ways that you can connect with this project. We have arts and wellness opportunities, as well as economic development opportunities to get involved. But most recently and in the past, we have partnered with groups like the East End Bike Group, where they've biked along this section of Buffalo Bayou and stopped at unique destinations that either Buffalo Bayou Partnership owns or trails that are existing, and then having to, kind of navigate around that since not all of them are connecting yet. This, and also we normally have East End and East Sector wellness walks. Obviously we can't have those right now due to the current COVID situation, but we hope to resume these later in the year, at least early next year. So if you want to get involved with either of these or have your own type of group that you'd like to partner with us, feel free to shoot me over an email or go to our website to learn how to get connected. There are our Twitter and Instagram handles, as well as our Facebook. We post updates on there regularly, as well as update our website. So thank you all. I see a lot of people have already asked questions. We're gonna bring in Anne Olson, President of Buffalo Bayou Partnership, to assist Jose with answering some of these. We have about 30 minutes left, so we will answer as many as we can. We thank you for participating.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Jose, you did a great job in explaining everything, but I can see that people have lots of questions. Last week, we had a great round of questions. So we're looking forward to giving you more information. So Jose, one of the first questions that people ask, will there be dog parks located in the parks that we're developing?
As part of the community engagement piece, that topic actually came up rather frequently. One of the things that people are really concerned about, especially in neighborhoods around here, is that there are a lot of stray dogs. And so people were actually very concerned that if we created dog parks, we'd actually be, exacerbating the problem. So at this point, we're actually not including dog parks in any of the facilities at this point.
We actually have someone on our board, Gloria Zenteno, who runs a nonprofit called Barrio Dogs. And she's very involved in educating people over in the East End about stray dogs. Jose, you talked a little about the timeline and someone asked about the cost of the project.
This is a really, really big project. And as you saw, it has a lot of different pieces. So the way that we're actually approaching the cost for this is looking at each individual piece as its own separate project. For example, looking at like Tony Marron Park. As we develop each individual piece, we'll develop a budget for that particular piece. So there isn't at this point really a comprehensive budget that covers everything. And then additionally, there's also things, for instance, that we're not actually going to be implementing. For example, a lot of the on-street bike paths and things like that, bikeways, are not necessarily something that we would be building. It would be more, local governments like the city that would be building those. So even though we have this expansive vision, there's some pieces of the project that we'll actually be controlling, but other pieces that other people, will be developing. And so there's not really a comprehensive budget for the whole project.
Right, to build off that question and what Jose said, public-private partnerships will be key to what we do. And Buffalo Bayou Partnership has a very strong track record. Virtually all of our park and trail projects have been public-private partnerships where the city, the county, the Harris County Flood Control have contributed funds, and then we've gone out and raised private funds for the Bayou's revitalization. We're lucky in that since we've launched the plan, we've received a few significant grants from major foundations, and it's allowing us to kickstart the project and to get things off and running much more quickly than we had anticipated. One of the questions is, they want us to talk about the environmental issues on some of the properties in this part of town. And before I address that, let me say that unlike Buffalo Bayou Park and most of the projects we've worked on in downtown, much of the property east of downtown has been in private hands. And so Buffalo Bayou Partnership has worked over the last 15 years, 20 years or so to purchase property. We have received easements donated to us from some property owners, and then we've raised millions of dollars, more than $10 million, to purchase land in Buffalo Bayou East. So address the issues of environmental contamination on these sites. As you know, many of these properties are former industrial sites. Every property that Buffalo Bayou Partnership has purchased, we have done phase 1 and phase 2 environmental studies on. And in all cases, the properties have been cleaned. And in Texas, park space has to be up to residential standards. So as we move forward, purchasing additional land, we'll be doing the same rigorous environmental studies that we've done in the past. Let's see, another question, are we working with the East River development in the area? For those of you who are unfamiliar with East River, it's a 146-acre development on the former KBR site, between Jensen Drive and North York Street. Buffalo Bayou Partnership is not involved in this project. It is being developed by a company called Midway. However, years ago, we received an easement across this entire stretch of property. And as part of this plan, we do hope to work with Midway and construct the trail because it's a very, very vital link in this trail system. Jose, can you talk a little bit about how people can get involved in projects that we're developing?
In terms of the way we're looking at rolling out the plan, one of the first things that we'll be doing, and unfortunately, obviously COVID kind of changes this, is we really want to activate the bayou itself. You know, the goal is to actually get people used to going to the water. So what are the kinds of activities that we can get people to do? So for example, you know, Jessica mentioned things like bike tours of the area. We really want people to start using these spaces and you know, providing you know, to really use them. As we start developing each individual project, we'll actually go back to the community. We'll look at what are the priorities we included in the master plan, and then look at, are those still valid? And then also continue to get community involvement in basically every project that we do.
Some other questions, and this again dovetails with what Jose was just talking about. What community groups do you plan to work with specifically? As we've been developing the plan and having our community meetings, various groups have been involved, and we want to continue those partnerships. Groups like Legacy Health in the 5th Ward, the 5th Ward Community Redevelopment Corporation, the East End Management District. In the East End, El Centro de Corazon, Urban Harvest. Urban Harvest is located just a few blocks from the bayou. Trey Robles, which is an urban farm. One of the questions asked, will you be working with groups that are or have community gardens and farms over in that part of town? And finally, affordable housing developers. The question was, are you specifically developing Lockwood South, and are you working with other affordable housing developers? I'm happy to say that there are many affordable housing projects that are underway in this part of town. New Hope Housing, who has a history of working in this part of town, is developing a project just south of Navigation Boulevard on Avenue J. Another group, Covenant Community Capital, they've worked a lot in the 5th Ward in the past. They're developing I believe it's a mixed income housing project on McKee Street, closer to downtown. The 5th Ward CRC on Lyons Avenue is developing a project at St. Elizabeth Hospital along Lyons Avenue. And then our project, again, is at Lockwood South. Let's see, what are some other questions? Let's see. One of the questions was, are you going to be recording this? We are recording it and it will be posted. I don't know if Jessica mentioned this. Here's another question. Is the Houston Maritime Museum part of this project? Jose, do you want to answer that?
No, actually, it's not part of this project. They're looking to go in to partner with Midway on their site. We actually have not been coordinating with them. So that's not a project that falls into our portion of Buffalo Bayou East. However, you know, we do see them as another one of those assets in this area that will further, you know, further create an environment that enhances the community.
Yeah, we see that as an incredible asset and enhancement for the overall revitalization of the bayou east of downtown. I mean, this part of the waterway has an incredible maritime history with the port being there. And I know they're working very closely with the port. There are incredible opportunities to educate children about the history of this part of town. Another question, have you considered turning the old silos into a climbing park? Jose, do you want to talk about that?
That's one of those sites that we're, like I said earlier, as we go through each one of these projects, once we start really looking at designing them, then we'll actually go back to the community and figure out what goes on there. So right now, the plan doesn't necessarily say that there's going to be a climbing wall there or not, but as we go back to the community, and if there's a strong support for ideas like that, we would look at it and see if that's something that we could actually incorporate it. And in general, that's how we would look at every site as we develop it, going back to the community and incorporating things that the community really wants.
How has COVID affected the timeline for the plan, Jose?
In terms of short term, unfortunately, we can't have the big community meetings like we had before COVID. So big a couple hundred people in a room, that's just not feasible. So what we'll actually do is do community engagement more in an online forum like this, so that we can get additional feedback. We'll also look at what are the other options in terms of getting community input. So that's kind of a short-term thing. But in terms of more of a long-term issue, we really see and have seen that during COVID, open spaces and green spaces are really what people want access to. I mean, it's one of the few places that it's really easy and safe to maintain social distance and get out of your house that many of us are cooped up in. So we see Tony Marron Park really enhancing opportunities for outdoor spaces during pandemics like COVID.
Someone asked, who do I contact for business opportunities? Like Jose said previously, small business development is something that we want to focus on, probably a little bit later in the plan as we design the specific parks and trails and think of ways that we can incorporate small businesses. However, we'll be having events throughout the process, and there are loads of ways that small businesses can get involved. For instance, food trucks. When we had the project launch at our Turkey Bend site back in October, we made sure that the food trucks that were there were from the neighborhood. We work with a lot of food truck operators in Buffalo Bayou Park, but not all of them were from the Fifth Ward in the East End. So we made a conscious attempt to invite them to participate. Maintenance is another area that we hope small businesses can get involved with. And in fact, if you are a small business owner or if you know someone that has a maintenance company, we would love to hear from you right now, because we are starting to maintain some of the trails, and we already do maintain much of the green space in this part of town. Let's see. Will public art be incorporated into our projects? Great question. Buffalo Bayou Park has a very strong history of public art. We incorporate public art into our capital projects always. So in Buffalo Bayou Park, you'll see lots of public art. Here at Allen's Landing, where we office, you'll see public art along the waterfront, but we also love temporary public art. We love to have art installations, and so you'll be seeing more of that. But arts and culture are embedded in the plan, and as we move forward, You'll be hearing more about that. And those are the kind of things that we can do sooner than later. Some of these park projects that we're developing, you know, they're going to take the next 6 to 8 months just to design. Then a lot of fundraising will need to happen. But in the meantime, public art will be something that we can incorporate into what we're doing. So what segments of the overall project will we be starting with? That's a great question. Jose, do you want to take that one? I think you highlighted it a little bit earlier on.
Right now, one of the pieces that we're looking at, we're working with Harris County and the city of Houston on the connection between Buffalo Bend Nature Park and Hidalgo Park. The other piece, obviously, like we said, Clayton Homes is one of the first pieces that should, you know, in the near future be open. Trail connectivity in general is one of the things we really want to make sure we do so that people can get across this area. We're also looking at, on the north side of the bayou, starting with what work we can do at Japhet Creek, you know, to clean up the existing waterway, remove invasive species, and to start developing that park space up at Clinton Drive. And then, you know, at the first big project we're really working, you know, we're aiming towards is Tony Marron Park, which is the heart of the overall master plan. That's the big open green space. And then also the one other piece is the Lockwood South development, because of Harvey relief money, you know, and money coming into the city for new housing. That's another piece that we'll be starting to work on.
Someone asked about when is the Clayton Homes Trail opening? It's actually opened right now. Jose did have a slide of the former railroad bridge. That is open, and this is an incredible connection. It links to Guadalupe Plaza and then farther east. I should also mention that our organization is working with the Houston Parks Board on a trail. We'll be breaking ground on this trail in downtown. And that will lead, again, over into the East End. So slowly, all of these missing links are being built. Someone asked, will you be working in the area east of the turning basin along the ship channel? The answer is no. Our organization's jurisdiction is from Shepherd Drive on the west all the way to the Port of Houston turning basin. East of the turning basin, where it becomes the Houston ship channel, that is actually a very high security zone. And boats, our pontoon boat, for instance, has to get clearance whenever we enter that stretch of the bayou. Let's see, Jose, a question. When do you imagine you would develop the navigation corridor?
That's one of those pieces that, as I mentioned, that's not necessarily a project that Buffalo Bayou Partnership itself would take on. It's not on the bayou. It's immediately adjacent to the bayou and connects across the entire area, but it's not a project that we would control. So that piece would actually really be, you know, we would work to advocate for it with the city and, you know, Harris County's precinct 1 and 2. But in terms of the control of it, it's a large project, so we imagine that it would actually probably be on the later, you know, stages of the master plan.
Someone asked about the trash in the bayou. What are you doing about that? Buffalo Bayou Partnership has a program called Clean and Green. We have 5 guys. All they do every week, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. They go up and down the bayou from the Port of Houston all the way up to about the Waugh Drive Bridge in Buffalo Bayou Park, picking up trash and debris. So that's an ongoing project of ours. It's a $500,000 a year program funded by the Harris County Flood Control and the Port of Houston Authority, as well as some minor, very little private money. So we will continue that program as we move forward. That's a really important question. Is there a canoe launch that is accessible today? There is a canoe launch, a boat launch in back of Our Lady, or in back of Guadalupe Plaza Park. People do ask about the launch site at a property that we own in North York. Right now, we do not allow public access, mainly because the site hasn't been redeveloped. But as Jose mentioned, that site will be developed as part of our Tony Marron Park project. How do we interact with the city on the Houston's Bayou Greenways? I just mentioned that we're working with Bayou Greenways on a project in downtown, a really important project. However, their efforts to date have really concentrated on the other bayous in Houston: White Oak, Halls Bayou, Grays Bayou. Let's see, what else? I'm trying to think. Let's see. I think, you know, many of these questions are similar. Again, a question about how I can get involved, the timeline. How about the size of the trails? This is a good question. And will we be having a system like we have in Buffalo Bayou Park? Unfortunately, to date, because of the private property ownership, most of our easements are 30 feet. We would very much like to widen these trails. They allow about 10-foot wide trails, but we would love to widen them to about 15 feet. If any of you were in Buffalo Bayou Park about a month or two ago, you could see how busy the trails were. So we'd love to have wider trails. Another question was, do you plan to have lighting along the trails? Yes, we do plan to have lighting. Other amenities will be our wayfinding signage. We'd love to have interpretive signage that will highlight the history of this part of town. Public art, like I say. One thing I failed to mention about public art is that our deeper dive presentation next week will focus on public art, and we have our Vice President of External Affairs, Karen Farber, and our board member, Judy Nyquist, who heads up our public art committee, talking about our past public art projects and giving you a glimpse of what we are planning for the future. So I don't know, I think we've come to the end of most of the questions. This presentation will be on our website. I believe we'll also be sending it out again when we publicize next week's presentation. And also feel free to contact any of us by email or even call us. We really appreciate everyone for participating. It's been a great dialogue, and we're really excited about this plan. I don't know how many people ended up being on the presentation, but we had over 400 people who registered. So I think that really shows the excitement and the support that we have for this planning effort. Thank you again.